Hello and welcome to Spy Hard's podcast, where your hosts go deep undercover into the world of spy movies to decipher which films make the knock list. But remember, this information is strictly for your ears only. I'm Agent Scott.
And I'm Cam the Provocateur, also known as the Hairless Canadian.
Well, yeah, I guess that makes me the hairless Brit.
I guess so, yeah.
Yeah, well, we're starting this on a dour note, our follically challenged middle-aged bodies.
I gotta go, Scott. I gotta lay down and think about my life.
Yeah. But let's up the tempo and talk about a film, a spy movie, an interesting one at that, and we're delving into a filmmaker we haven't spoken about in a little while, and we have a fantastic guest. So without further ado, let's get to the review. All right, Cam, it's been a while since we've gone back to this well, but I need to scratch that hitch.
Yes.
I already hear the people eye rolling. I don't care. Listen, it was a great pun when I wrote it down 3 hours ago. But to save me from my terrible puns, I'm bringing in an expert. Joining us on the show, film writer and author extraordinaire of the wonderful book Hitchology, a film-by-film guide to the style and themes of Alfred Hitchcock. It is none other than Mr. Neil Alcock. Hello, sir. How are you?
Hi, Scott. Hi, Cam. I'm very well. Thanks for having me on. This is a privilege.
For us. Yeah.
Pleasure's all ours, for us.
I like
Okay,
that you went
fine,
in with that statement that it is a privilege for us. You really just sort of like...
Yeah, I could have finished the sentence, couldn't I? But I thought I'd just leave it hanging.
Yeah, well, that's the Hitchcock way. But we've got an interesting film to talk about here, an early Hitchcock spy movie, which we're going to dive into. But I want to take us back a little bit. I want to talk a little bit about the book and your love of Alfred Hitchcock.
Okay.
Because there's a reason why you've put a whole book together.
Mm.
So why Alfred Hitchcock as a subject for a book? What inspired you to do this?
Well, Hitchcock is a director that was introduced to me at college. I was doing A-level film studies, and I was already a film fan. I was already aware of Alfred Hitchcock, and I'd seen, I don't know, 2 or 3 of the more famous films, but hadn't really taken the time to get to know him very well or study those films very well. And I had a great tutor at college who showed us Vertigo. Well, in fact, he put Vertigo on the syllabus, as it were, and then on the day that he screened it, I was actually off sick, so I had to borrow the VHS tape when I got back to college and take it home and watch it at home. And I just thought it was completely mad. It was like nothing I'd ever seen before. A kind of whole new world of films opened up to me that day, and I thought, okay, this is really interesting. And the way it ended in particular was just kind of blew my tiny mind. So it was from that point on, really, studying that at A-level. I went on to do a film studies degree and just wanted to watch more and more Hitchcock. The more I saw, the more I wanted to see. So I would go out and kind of get hold of as many VHS tapes as I could. We are going back quite some time, obviously.
Yeah.
And yeah, I was just aware that there was something going on there that was more interesting than any other directors I was aware of. There was an obvious style, and there were obvious connections between the films, but there was also this way of shooting and this way of showing things and telling the story that seemed to me totally original. And that has been the case ever since. And every time I go back to watch a Hitchcock film, I've seen them all several times. There's always something new that pops out at me, but even the stuff that I've seen loads and loads of times, I always think, God, that's good. That's so clever. And I just felt like I realized that, people are aware of Alfred Hitchcock. There are plenty of books about Alfred Hitchcock. He's not a kind of cult director that people need to be made aware of. But I hadn't seen anything that really promoted the stuff that I loved the most about those films. So I just wanted to gather all that in one place and present it to people and say, I don't know if you've noticed this. Maybe it's arrogant of me to think that you haven't, but if not, here are some really, truly amazing things about Alfred Hitchcock's films and how that whole series of films works together as a cohesive whole. And that's kind of where it came from.
And I would just love to know, because you mentioned Vertigo, and I think, a lot of listeners will have seen Psycho or North by Northwest. What were some of the hidden gems that you discovered along your way that really jumped out to you?
Hidden gems, I guess the first one that comes to mind is Foreign Correspondent because it's a spy film and we're here to talk about spy films. Um,
Hmm.
I just was amazed when I saw that the first time because I thought nobody ever talks about this film, and it's really funny, really clever, really fast-paced um, action spy film with, made in 1941, I think, or 1940, and just loads of stuff going on. It just doesn't stop, and every set piece is incredible and different from the one before it. And I just thought, I can't believe this film exists, and the whole world isn't talking about it as much as they talk about North by Northwest, for example. It's not as good as North by Northwest, but there's no way it deserved at that time. Maybe it's had a bit of a reappraisal since then, but it just seemed weird to me that nobody was talking about it. And then when it came time for me to really delve into Hitchcock and really get into the nuts and bolts of stuff, the wartime shorts that he made in 1944, one of them is fantastic and one of them is less so, so I won't talk about that one. But Bon Voyage, which is about half an hour long, is an incredible, cracking short spy story set in wartime with the French resistance, and it's about a RAF gunner who is trying to help the French resistance and unwittingly becomes a kind of Nazi stooge. But the whole film is not really about that. It's about storytelling because he is telling his story in flashback. And as the story progresses, more information is revealed than he is revealing. And you realize that there's a bit of unreliable narrator stuff going on. And it just kind of folds into itself. It's a really meta film about storytelling, I think. And that kind of stuff just I just think it's tragic that there isn't more discussion around those unseen gems. They're not unseen, hidden gems, let's say.
Hmm.
Well, it's one of those arguments I've heard before that is there such a thing as like an underrated or hidden gem when it comes to Alfred Hitchcock or Bond films and stuff? And I think it certainly can be the case because there are many films in both of those genres that people don't talk about half the time. Like, less people talk about Living Daylights than they do Goldfinger. Less people talk about Foreign Correspondent than they do North by Northwest. So I think
Yeah,
it's a perfect pick.
yeah. Um, I just think with Hitchcock, who's made 53 films, there's so much room for subjectivity that I think it's fair for somebody to come along and say, well, Foreign Correspondent isn't actually that good, so why would more people talk about it? But I think it's got a lot of value.
Plus, there's all the early films that Skin Game, Pleasure Garden, where it's like,
Yeah.
for some people there'll be the odd one there that will actually connect, and that's before the period where he's really cranking out the movies people love.
Yeah, the silence are incredible, really. He just plunged into this way of visual storytelling immediately, and The Pleasure Garden is a brilliant example of that. There's stuff in there that you wouldn't believe is coming from like 1925. The Lodger, his third film, or the third film he made, but the first to get released was, that's more famous because it's a kind of fairly classic Hitchcock story. But that's another one that's just got amazing sequences in it that you wouldn't expect from that time. He was just well ahead of his time.
One thing when I was sort of digesting your book over the last week and taking it in, I give you credit for, and I'm not just throwing out a well done just because you're on the show or anything like that. It's actually just genuinely the case because I have a whole shelf in front of me right now full of spy books. I would say like resource books or
Hmm.
things that have knowledge in them about certain writers, directors, or genres, or like James Bond, things like that. And a lot of them can be very dry.
Yes. So this was a key thing for me. And it probably comes from writing for Empire magazine and writing my own blog, The Incredible Suit, which almost nobody read, but that's fine. But the whole point of that was to just be a bit more freewheeling and a bit more relaxed and be a bit more chatty and funny if possible. Um, and I just felt exactly the same as you. There are so many books out there about Hitchcock that have got amazing information in them and really great analysis. And I'm not doing those books down at all, but some of them are quite difficult to get through, and I think that's off-putting for a lot of potential viewers. So I really did want to write something that was accessible to a wider audience.
Was there a film that was the most challenging to write about?
Um, I mean, I sweated a bit before Vertigo just because. So it's there's so much you could say about it, and I knew that I was limiting myself to 1,000 words for each film, so that was a problem. Also, so much has been written about that film. Same with Psycho, really. So the challenges were always to just try and find something new, and I can't possibly read everything that there is about Hitchcock, but I've read a lot about Hitchcock, so I was looking for things that I hadn't read elsewhere and making sure that that was the kind of stuff that went in the book. Um, there were some that were just difficult births, really. Like I remember writing The Strangers on a Train chapter and spending most of the day just staring out the window because I couldn't think of what to write. And then when I finally did write it, I read it back the next day and it was terrible. So I completely scrapped it and rewrote it. So, there were things like that, but that wasn't particularly because of the film or something else. I think it's just wherever my head was at that day.
Hmm.
Right. And I would just love to know, like, your process for writing each film. How many times did you watch the movie before you wrote the individual chapters?
Well, I had seen all of the films before already, some of them a lot more times than others, but I just made it. I made it my job to watch each film at least once, make
Hmm.
notes, do a load of reading, make notes from that reading, type those notes up, fill out the rubbish, and then kind of construct a basic uh, plan for that chapter, and then kind of flesh that out. And that's basically how it went. It sounds very simple, but it took about 4 years to do that. So, um, yeah. And then I would sometimes I would watch them more than once if I felt like I hadn't quite grasped something, and that was easy with stuff like Number 17, which is only about an hour long. I think I watched that twice in a day. Um,
Yeah, that one. Just trying to figure out the plot of that one as things
yeah,
move along is
yeah.
that's a challenge.
So that's an interesting one actually in terms of like hidden gems, because I had seen that film before and kind of dismissed it, and then I watched it again for the book, and I thought, yeah, this is quite impenetrable. I don't really know what's going on. But after doing the reading, making the notes, thinking about it, and then going back to watch it again, it suddenly appealed to me in a whole new way, and it's actually a really funny, great little kind of spooky dark house comedy mystery. But it's a bit hard to get that on the first go through. It's something you do have to have a bit of patience with.
Hmm.
And I think we'll come back to the book a little bit towards the end of the discussion, wrapping up the film. But I want to segue us into spy movies because I know even in the second page of your book, James Bond is uttered.
Yeah, that was inevitable.
So I think you might like spy movies.
Well, so here's the thing. I love James Bond movies. That is definitely a thing, and James Bond was always going to find his way. I could write a book about cushions, and James Bond would be in there somewhere. I don't know. I couldn't write a book about cushions. I don't know enough about cushions, and
I
also
was going to
cushions.
say that's an interesting follow up.
Yeah, I mean, it's not. It's a very boring follow-up. But spy movies generally, I don't. I have a lot of not a lot of trouble, but I really struggle to find good, interesting ones outside of Bond, the Mission Impossible movies I really love, and then Hitchcock. And I think, I know absolutely nothing about spying in the real world, nothing at all. I listened to your Torn Curtain episode where you had a guest on who worked at the Spy Museum, and he knew tons about real life espionage, and that was really interesting and impressive. So I have absolutely no frame of reference for anything like that. Um, but for me, it's just kind of escapism, uh, action, I suppose, which I realize is entirely not what real spies do. And I do like a kind of spy movie where people just mooch about in dark corners and crack codes and whisper to each other. I don't need tons of action to make an exciting film, but yeah, I was going through like the list of all of your episodes, wondering if there was anything in there that I really love and would talk about other than what I've already mentioned. And I'd seen a lot of them, but I'm not really. None of them really kind of stand out to me. I'm sorry. It's absolutely the last thing you want to hear on a spy movies podcast is that
No,
your guest isn't that into spy movies.
no. We like outside opinions as
Mhm.
well, and you're in good company because Scott and I know nothing about spying either. So
Okay, I would have thought you'd learned something by now. God.
you'd think,
No, I think it's actually made us worse.
yeah.
Okay.
I will just try and emulate Condor Man or something if I ever became a spy in real life, and no spy is going to look good in a yellow leotard.
Well, I don't know. I think that's an excellent role model.
We all wish to be Michael Crawford, so there is that. But Well, it is interesting that it isn't something you necessarily go to. And boy, do we have a list of the best spy movies ever that you could check out from our show that you could find some ones you really like. I'd recommend that.
Okay, I'll do that.
But I think that puts us in good stead with this film because you've clearly got the credentials of loving Alfred Hitchcock. And you like a good spy movie, not the bad ones. So you can be objective about things. And I think that probably leads us into the question I'm going to ask you, Cam. What are we talking about?
Yes, we are tackling 1936's Secret Agent, starring John Gielgud and Madeleine Carroll.
I'm glad you pronounced it first. I wasn't quite sure how you pronounced his surname, Gielgud.
That was a real just roll the dice and see where they land.
Okay.
I might chip in here and say that it actually stars Madeleine Carroll and John Gielgud.
Well, Madeleine Carroll, many spaces, and then John Gielgud.
I was going to say Peter Lorre and then him as well. Like I put a few up.
I can't remember exactly how they're credited, but Madeleine Carroll is definitely top billed in this film, which is something when you think that John Gielgud is in there.
Yeah, and they give her the top billing at the introductory credit, but then when they cut to the characters, they put him at the top, and it's one of those things that because of that, it gets moved all around when you look online at various credit listings.
Like IMDb has him in first position. But
okay.
IMDb is not the most trustworthy of sources.
No.
Sorry, IMDb. Don't come at Spy Hards. That's not our fault. Well, okay. If it is your first time listening to someone talk about or hearing about the film Secret Agent, here is the synopsis for the film. Secret Agent. Dead woman tell no tales was the motto of this charming lady killer. I quite like that.
What?
I don't know how that relates to the film, but okay.
I like it though. It sounds good. I think it's the I think what he's trying to point to is the Marvin character.
Oh.
Like as a lady killer, I guess.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Okay.
Although there are no dead women in the film.
No.
Anyway,
carry
continuing on. After 3 British agents are assigned to assassinate a mysterious German spy during World War I, 2 of them become ambivalent when their duty to the mission conflicts with their conscience.
Fair.
Yeah. Okay.
They've kind of stripped out, like,
Sure.
they've not really highlighted any of the fun action stuff in the film. It's
Yeah.
just like the morality play, which is actually what the film is trying to run away from half the time.
It's not a great sell. It's not going to pull the punters in.
I like the lady killer line. I guess that you could. It feels like an early, like, Psycho. You have to be from the beginning. You have to heal the whole story. That sort of thing. Like hook them in with a sort of a good tagline.
Yeah.
It's very sensationalistic. It's like, come on, this is like lurid material, folks. You have to check this out. And then they watch Secret Agent.
Yeah, it's got more of a beating heart than the film does, I would say.
I think
Well,
they could have used the words crazy haired sex pest to describe Peter Lorre's character. That might have got people in.
Extraordinary mustache and extraordinary lady killing skills.
Yeah.
Well, let's before we unpack the history of Secret Agent. Obviously, there is a whole chapter in your book about Secret Agent, so we can kind of get into that in the background of the film. But initial experiences. This is my first time watching Secret Agent. A lot of spy films on the show. It's the first time watch, so I haven't got any background with Secret Agent. Cam, I'll go to you first before we go to Neil. Had you seen this one before, and what was your experience with Secret Agent?
Yeah, so I'd only seen it once, and it was back when I was kind of like Neil, going through a journey of discovery with a lot of the Hitchcock films outside of Psycho and Rear Window and what have you. And so I bought one of those collections that cost about $6 that have like 8 Hitchcock movies.
Sure.
And, Jamaica Inn was on that set, Young and Innocent. There was a few of them. But I watched Secret Agent, and the audio was very terrible. And so I made the best I could with it, but it was one that I enjoyed the set pieces. The actual espionage I found very difficult to follow. And I was looking at my review from when I, God knows when I wrote that. And it was like the most like, yeah, this was like a 3-star movie kind of review. And I think a lot of that had to do with just, there was a little bit of a barrier put up by the quality of the print I saw.
That's interesting because there's something I have experienced this time around. So I wonder what your 2 experiences has been with sort of this revisit. But Neil, I'll go to you. When did Secret Agent first turn up on your doorstep in your sort of Hitchcock deep dive, as it were?
I mean, I honestly can't remember. It would have been one of those that I just kind of saw one day in a shop and realized that I hadn't seen that one, so I grabbed the VHS. And I literally can't tell you when that was, when the first time I saw it was. I didn't have Letterboxd then, so I can't have logged it. But I totally understand what Cam's saying about quality. There are some really shonky, still some shonky DVDs out there of it. And was it a DVD or was it a VHS that you saw first?
It was a DVD, and I actually watched it
Okay.
for this viewing as well. Still had that DVD, but what I did was I used Bluetooth earbuds
Oh,
and made all the difference in the world. But I wouldn't have had those, of course, back when I watched it the first time.
okay, fair enough. Yeah, so I think I mean, it's still crying out for a kind of remaster and a decent Blu-ray. But I've got what's it called? Cinema Classics, I think it's called, or something like that. DVD version of it, which is, I think it's about the best you'll get at this stage. Whether we'll see a better version of not or not, I don't know. But the sound quality is still not great. It's quite shrill at times. There's some sound design in the film which lends itself to a really decent sound mix, which this version doesn't have, but we can talk about that later. So it can be quite off-putting, I think, and yeah, some of the images are a bit muddy, but it's there's a version on YouTube. I don't know whether that's any good. You can watch that for free, but
That's what I watched.
okay.
And the visual quality, it was in HD. Like it was as good as a DVD was going to look. But some of the sound, I felt like I was in a washing machine.
Mm.
Yeah.
And that I was like, because we've watched some pretty, I'll use shonky again, films on YouTube like 1930s, 1940s, even 1920s, silent era spy movies in the past through YouTube, and it's been a mixed bag. So I put it at the doorstep of YouTube, but then I looked at some reviews afterwards, and there was a lot of people saying no, the sound mix is pretty bonkers and all that, because it's in the public domain, this film as well.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So let's get into that side of things then, and I think one thing is important to note as well. I wonder how many people have watched this after watching something like The 39 Steps or The Man Who Knew Too Much, which come very much in this same period of time, and I'd say are very different films.
Yeah, and the funny thing with this movie was too the title. The title makes it something you want to watch.
Mm-hmm.
Like I remember when I got that DVD set and I saw Secret Agent listed, first one I watched, and it was like, oh, okay.
And this came after 39 Steps? All right, that's a choice. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
let's dive into that. So how did this film happen, Cam?
Okay, so it's based on a novel by W. Somerset Maugham. I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce that. I think that's about right. I'm taking a shot on that one as well. But he was a very prolific British novelist. So Scott, you should know the name of how to pronounce that as well.
It's pronounced Mauam.
Maugham?
No, I'm kidding.
Like the chewy sweets.
There you go.
But yes, a British novelist and playwright, best known for the books Of Human Bondage, The Painted Veil, or Razor's Edge. And he was also, during wartime, a secret agent for British intelligence.
Cool.
And in 1927, he published a short story collection called Ashendon, or The British Agent. And 2 stories from that collection were adapted into Secret Agent, The Traitor and The Hairless Mexican. And so it's not the full book, it's those 2 stories. Now, if you look at the film, though, you'll see it also acknowledges another source, and that is a play. Now, there was a play based on these stories by Australian-born writer Campbell Dixon, and the love story was introduced in the play, and that is what they took and added into the Hitchcock film.
Okay, so multiple sources. Let's put it that way.
I thought it was really interesting, though, when you see the credits in the film, that the play gets top billing over the book.
I would assume then that what the script is basically a pretty much a jumble of what is in the play.
Yeah.
I haven't seen the play and I haven't read the books, I'm afraid. But what I do know is that Alfred Hitchcock very rarely stuck to his source material. I'm sure you guys know this, but he just filleted out the stuff that he liked and then made up a bunch of other stuff.
I think that's come up before in one of the films we've done of his so far.
Yeah, he did it all the time. This is very cheeky, but it worked.
Yeah, he would take like the plot concept and then be like, huh, and just let his imagination run wild. Like in this film, all the Switzerland stuff is him. He's like, oh, what could you do in Switzerland? Chocolate. That's a thing. I don't think that stuff's in the play or the book.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. So Alfred Hitchcock, we mentioned him. He's been in the game with his name as a director since 1925's The Pleasure Garden, um, and this has been kind of a run building up to, especially the spycraft stuff. In 1932 you had the Number 17, which we mentioned earlier. In 34, Waltzes in Vienna, but also in 1934, The Man Who Knew Too Much, the original film, which we covered on the show. And then he followed that up with the 39 Steps, a movie that we were huge fans of and really loved.
Still are. We're not
And
past tense like Cam just inferred.
yeah, not past tense, not past. We didn't turn the curve on that one. We're still fans of 39 Steps. We were
Good.
less so enthusiastic maybe about the first remake, but the original is great.
Yeah, the 50s remake of 39 Steps is probably one you could all skip and save yourself an hour and a half.
That's a film that I had on DVD in a drawer waiting to be watched for about 4 years, and then I thought, there's the reason it's been here for 4 years, so it went back to the charity shop.
It is exactly what you think it is.
Yeah.
The 70s version though is a different beast.
Mm-hmm.
I know, but we haven't reviewed that yet, so I'll leave that there.
Yes, and Secret Agent was, of course, the follow-up to the 39 Steps 1 year later.
It's a real Rise of the Skywalker, eh?
Well, hold on to those thoughts, Scott.
Steady on.
Well,
and he was working with writer Charles Bennett, who had worked with Hitchcock in 1929 when Bennett had written a play called Blackmail that Hitchcock turned into a film. And he was a long working writer, and they had teamed up on the 39 Steps as well. So they had great success. And Bennett, in the meantime, had done a cruise ship romance film called All at Sea and followed up that film with The Secret Agent. But he would go on and work with Hitchcock on other films like Young and Innocent, Foreign Correspondent, and then go on and just have a long career. He was the original writer of Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea, which was a big sort of sci-fi hit in the 1960s, and then worked on the TV show as well, launched the show, and wrote 7 episodes of that. So that's kind of, I think, like one of the stealth credits people might not think of with Alfred Hitchcock's writer.
Yeah, Charles Bennett is a really important collaborator for Hitchcock, and I think it's worth talking about him a little bit because he's so important to this period of Hitchcock's filmmaking and to the kind of building of the legend of Hitchcock. So he wrote with Hitchcock. He wrote the first 5 of what has become known as the classic thriller sextet, which began with The Man Who Knew Too Much, and then the 39 Steps, Secret Agent, Sabotage, Young and Innocent, and The Lady Vanishes. He didn't write The Lady Vanishes, but then he did write Foreign Correspondent, which came a few years later. But he was an absolute master of kind of plot construction. So he kind of created all the beats of the film and kind of built that suspense. He was like the master of suspense before Hitchcock was. And he taught Hitch how to kind of really build a suspenseful, action-packed screenplay. So I feel like he never quite got amongst scholars and people who know a lot about Hitchcock, his name will be familiar already, but he's one of those people who Hitchcock worked with very closely, got a lot out of, and then kind of discarded, and then went on to do different things. And a lot of people found that happened to them when they worked with Hitchcock. But yeah, Bennett was a good guy, and I found this great quote from him when I was doing some research where he kind of lamented that he wasn't recognized as much as he could have been, and he modestly proclaimed, "I'm not being conceited, but I was awfully bloody good."
And he was he is I think stealth figure just in the purposes of this podcast as a crucial creator of spy films.
Yeah.
That he kind of is helping create the template that people look back to all the time and say this is where spy films really found their footing, but they tend to, as you said, Neil, point to Hitchcock, not him.
Yeah. He shares Hitchcock's cameo in the 39 Steps. They walk past a bus together.
I'll have to look out for
I
that.
knew that.
No, I don't think I knew that either. I saw Hitchcock, but yeah, I guess I wouldn't know him.
Yeah, Hitchcock is standing in front of Bennett, so you don't really see a lot of Bennett, but they are there.
Oh God, poor Bennett.
It's a deeper meaning to that, I think.
Yeah, very much
perhaps.
so.
But it's a true thing you say, though. It's always an interesting discussion that we have online with people. Some people are led into the belief that James Bond invented the spy movie genre, or at least perhaps perfected it to many.
Hmm.
But a lot of what is now known as like the tropes of spy movies comes from this era.
Yeah, and also I don't know if you've covered or seen Fritz Lang's Spione, which is really, a film that Hitchcock had obviously seen, so obviously seen. There's a lot of Hitchcockian stuff going on in there, and I think he probably stole a few bits and pieces from Lang.
That one is on the to-do list, and maybe this year.
Yeah,
I've seen bits of it over the years, but I've been trying to keep myself away from it to fully immerse ourselves when we watch it.
yeah, it's quite crazy, but it's really worth watching to see kind of how it influenced Hitchcock and others that came after it.
Mm-hmm. And so there was a dialogue pass done on this film by Ian Hay, who was actually a collaborator of Marilyn Carroll's at the time, because he had actually worked on I Was a Spy, which we
Madeleine.
covered. What did I say?
Marilyn.
Did I say Marilyn?
I think I said that earlier as well. It's going to happen.
It's
Oh my
infectious.
God.
Keep this in. It's infectious.
Oh my God! Yeah. Oh my God! Apologies to Madeleine Carroll. Yes, but
She's listening from the grave. Hey, Maddie, what's going on?
I mean, it's nowhere near as bad as what Hitchcock called her, which I think he was the nickname that he coined for her on the 39 Steps, which was the Birmingham Tart.
Oh boy.
oh
Yep,
boy,
Not
oh boy.
problematic at all.
Oh boy! I just hope her grave marker doesn't have Marilyn with a line through it with Madeleine.
If not, we'll be doing that when we visit it soon.
Oh, speak for yourself, Scott.
Oh, okay.
I'm not going to confess to that one up front. Yeah. So we covered the movie I Was a Spy, which he was a star of.
Mhm.
That movie was quite good.
Yeah.
And he had also done a dialogue pass on the 39 Steps, which he co-starred in. And so yeah, he otherwise had a very diverse filmography, but for that period of time, may have been someone she was bringing in. I'm not exactly sure. It seems a bit of a coincidence. He's working on 3 of her films.
I have no further information on Ian Hay, I'm afraid.
We paused there just to see if you could come up with something, but
I
it's okay.
noticed.
Yeah. We're just intently looking at you on
Yeah.
the screen.
Yeah.
There was a anticipation there that we weren't fulfilled.
Absolutely nothing, sorry.
Yeah.
It's okay.
There was also additional dialogue done by Jesse Lasky Jr., who is maybe best known for some movies later down the road, like Reap the Wild Wind, which was a kind of big hit, Samson and Delilah with Hedy Lamarr, and a little movie called The Ten Commandments.
I've never seen it.
I don't think I've ever seen it.
Really? Oh, that is maybe on this side of the pond, that is everyone would have seen this movie at Easter.
Yeah.
Ten Commandments is a massive movie.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, it's Charlton Heston playing Moses. It's huge. It's 3.5 hours long. Cecil DeMille. It's big.
I think maybe just us, people from, well, I guess England in this room, are just a bit lazy. We see the word, it's 10? Oh, I mean, 5 I could handle, I guess, but 10's too much. It's like my stand-up act. What am I doing right now? What's the deal with 10?
It's very shady tree.
It is.
Is there well, now I have a question. Is there an Easter staple kind of movie? Because over here we would say Ben-Hur, The Ten Commandments.
Uh,
I mean, bank holidays are known as Bond things here.
time.
You'll get a Roger Moore film like Octopussy or Moonraker on, and everyone's like, yep, cool, that's Easter.
Oh, okay, that's fascinating. Okay, we're uncovering truths here.
Octopussy is the obvious Easter choice, isn't it, with the eggs?
Of course. I didn't think of that. Yes. Okay, Octopussy is our Easter film, officially now.
Okay, well then. And we talked about Sir John Gielgud. Hitchcock lured him into doing this movie. He wasn't that enthusiastic. He was a huge theater guy, but he won him over by describing the character in this film as something of a Hamlet figure, which I got to be honest, that's a stretch.
Yeah, okay.
You're a Shakespeare expert as well, Cam, so you know Hamlet pretty intimately.
Oh, dude, do not say expert.
Okay.
Do not say expert.
I can't speak to Neil, but I know I've been to the Globe with you, Cam.
Uh-huh.
I know you're a big Shakespeare buff. Can we call that?
Yeah, okay, that's better.
Okay.
I guess
I'm really struggling to make a connection between Hamlet and John Gielgud's character in Secret Agent.
I don't know. There's a tension between what he has to do and who he is.
Is there?
I don't
He seems
know.
pretty cool with it the entire time until he gets some tail, and he's like, I could kick this.
I don't know. Like John Gielgud apparently was a nightmare on set and wasn't happy with the performance or the character. So maybe he disagreed ultimately when he started shooting the movie. He
Yeah.
was like, "Hold on, this isn't Hamlet at all."
Where's the bit about Hamlet that you promised me? Where's the bit where I kill my uncle? Wait, my uncle isn't even in it?
Yeah. So the top 3 for the year. I could not find any financial information on Secret Agent. God knows. Do you know, Neil, if this movie was a success at the time?
No, it's really hard to dig up box office figures, even budgets from this time, because that information just didn't really get kept. But yeah, I don't know. I assume because of the 39 Steps, which was quite successful, it probably did well off the back of that, but
Mm.
I honestly couldn't say.
Yeah, it's a case where, like, the numbers I don't expect to find for this era, but you'll find a lot of comments that 39 Steps was very popular, for example, or The Man Who Knew Too Much was popular. I couldn't find even a quote of anyone saying anything about the actual performance of this film.
It's a secret.
It is a secret. You're right, Scott. But some movies that were successful that we know of, the top 3 for the year. Number 1 was The Great Ziegfeld, starring William Powell. That was a biopic of the sort of big Broadway guy who worked in Ziegfeld Follies. It is a 1930s biopic that won the Oscar for Best Picture. It is 3 hours long, and it is incredibly creaky to watch now. So I don't know if people would really enjoy that one.
I'm not running to it. Trust me.
I'd watch it for Bill Powell, but none of the rest of it is screaming to me.
Yeah, it is it's a test. Like when you go through and do the old I want to watch every Best Picture winner, that is one of the ones that's going to be more of a chore than an enjoyment. I'll say that.
Almost as if the Oscars are not necessarily the correct benchmark for good movies, right?
How dare you? How dare you say that Around the World in 80 Days was not one of the greatest films of all time? Number 2 was San Francisco, which was a musical disaster film about the 1906 earthquake in San Francisco.
Wow, that sounds cheery. I've never heard of that.
People are falling into fault lines and tap dancing their way down. Like, hello, my baby. Ah!
I got to be honest, when I heard musical disaster film, I instantly wanted to watch it.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's not enough of those.
No, and I know Brad Bird has been developing a 1906 project forever and has been wanting to direct it. And I'd like to think now it's a musical.
Sure. I think I'll just stick to the original.
Yeah.
Hmm?
Okay. And number 3 was The Plainsman, which was a Western starring Gary Cooper and directed by Cecil DeMille.
Classic.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
That sounds like 1930s.
Are these international rankings or US or what? Or we don't know.
Domestic. Yeah.
Okay,
US.
yeah.
It's tough to find worldwide with movies like that because of the release dates.
Yeah, and Hitchcock hadn't broken America at this point, really. People only really started to take interest in him after the 39 Steps, and I think even though this was his next movie, I still don't think it would have made much of a dent in the States.
No. Although for the National Board of Review, they called it one of the top foreign films of 1936. So
People probably thought that meant it was in a foreign language, which it effectively is, to be fair.
Yeah. The other note I had was Hitchcock would reteam with Charles Bennett the same year for the movie Sabotage. And Sabotage was based on a Joseph Conrad novel called Secret Agent.
The Secret Agent.
Yeah.
Is that why this gets confused sometimes?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it's. I don't know. I mean, it was one of those things when I was first learning about Hitchcock, where I did get confused between what was The Secret Agent and what was Sabotage. But yeah, it is exactly as Cam has described.
Yeah. And there's actually a 1996 film with Bob Hoskins called Secret Agent that I initially thought was a remake of this film, but is actually, a new adaptation of the film Sabotage.
Mm.
Oh, right. Okay. Is that on our list?
It is, yeah.
Oh, well, I don't think we've ever Bob Hoskins before.
I don't think so, no. Not yet.
Interesting. Okay.
He's not a huge spy movies guy, is he? So
No. It's a bit, yeah, probably a bit too fanciful for his filmography. I say that, and then he did.
Super Mario Brothers?
Yeah. I was just like, I couldn't think. I could see it in my head, but yeah, he's not a nitty gritty kind of actor, is he? He's done these weird ones.
I think he could have been an amazing M at some point.
Sure.
Oh, he put his mind to it.
Yeah, and like a kind of a tougher, fiercer M. I would have
Yeah.
loved that.
Yeah.
Kind of like the Ray Fiennes one, who'll pull out a pistol from time to time.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, or could have been. But we're here, we're talking about Hitchcock, we're talking about Secret Agent. What do we think of it in the year 2024? That is the question that we must answer. Neil, you're here. You are our Hitchcock expert. You've got the book. What do you think of Secret Agent?
My feelings about it tend to change each time I watch it. It is somewhere between a 3-star movie and a 4-star movie. It is not what you would call essential Hitchcock. And it's not, even in the quote classic thriller sextet unquote, it was probably in the bottom half of those 6 films. There's a lot in it to like, but I think there are a few things that let it down. John Gielgud's character and performance are not very exciting, so he's not very easily identifiable with, and he, you know, he is the kind of polar opposite of Peter Lorre's character, who is known as the General. Is it the General or the Colonel?
The General.
The general.
The
yeah.
General, right, okay. I've actually written down his full name somewhere here. General Pompilio Montezuma della Bella del Conde dell'Ombo.
Oh,
Which
clap.
he always,
Well done.
every time
Well
I had to
done.
write it down and read it off that. I wish I could memorize it, and I wish I could say it like Peter Lorre does, because it just comes out in a kind of stream of burble. So you've got, like, his character is just completely wild and wacky throughout the whole film, and really kind of shows off exactly how dull Gielgud's character is. So that's kind of a letdown. It's like Gielgud is not the kind of Cary Grant of this film. The rest of it is kind of fine in terms of script and story, but then there's this really rushed finale, which is quite common in films of this era, and especially in Hitchcock films. They are always wrapped up extremely quickly, but this one just kind of goes by in a flash, and 3 or 4 very important things happen in like the last 30 seconds, and you're just left reeling when it finishes, and you have to wind it back and go, wait, what just happened there? So things like that kind of let it down. But, there's a lot of great stuff in there, and I can talk specifically later about, like I was mentioning, the sound design and some of the very Hitchcockian things. And those things are the things that will make me keep coming back to that film, and, still make it stand up above a lot of other stuff around this time. I've been watching a lot of early Powell and Pressburger stuff lately. They made their first film together, The Spy in Black.
Great film.
Is a really great spy movie, yeah. And then they made another one called Blackout, which I think had a different title.
Counterfeit, I think is the other title.
That's right. And that is another spy movie, which is one of those films which I will always kind of watch and think, well, if Hitchcock did this, it would be loads better. And it's the kind of thing where whatever's bad about a Hitchcock film, there's always going to be some other great stuff in there. There's one Hitchcock film which I can think of where that is not the case. But in terms of these spy movies, there's a load of great stuff, and I do think it's worth watching. If you're interested in Hitchcock, it's definitely worth watching. If you're interested in spy movies, it's definitely worth watching. It isn't going to be your favorite of either of those categories, but there is some great stuff in there that I haven't seen anywhere else.
Okay.
I mean, just to pick something, I mean, we'll get into sort of likes and dislikes in a minute, but just to pick on something you mentioned that I find interesting, and it's actually, you talk a little about it in the book too, is that ending, which I think is a real, like, missed opportunity. I just found, like, there's this whole thing about, I mean, for those who haven't seen the film, our protagonists are on a train full of German soldiers, and they're, allies. They're the allies. Obviously, it's an enemy territory, basically, and they're undercover. There are literally enemies in every single compartment with them. They are surrounded, and there is almost no tension played out of that scene whatsoever. I just found, like, I kind of wish something had done with that. Like, I know Hitchcock is capable. I don't know whether that was Gielgud or just they were rushing it. But I remember watching that bit and just thinking, you could have. I mean, a different Hitchcock film would have had a very fun time with this train.
Yeah, and then the train crashes, which is very exciting. And in the wreckage of the crash, the only 4 people seen are the 4 main characters. All of those German soldiers have completely vanished.
Vaporized. That train just went up.
Yeah, and yet the 4 main characters have managed to land in kind of 3 square meter space together.
What I'm assuming is they were in the front carriage with the locomotive, and they were pushed clear, and all the German soldiers were in all the other carriages.
And just got smushed.
Just smushed.
Yeah, it's entirely possible.
Pate.
And then you have this really weird bit where Peter Lorre's character, who is on the side of the good guys, just kind of stumbles into frame with a gun, sits down next to the villain, who is kind of trapped under some bits of train, but his arms are free. And Peter Lorre just pops his gun down in front of the villain, and then is surprised when the villain picks the gun up and shoots him. And then the villain just dies for no real reason apart from.
And then the film just ends, more or less.
Yeah, and that's it. Yeah. So that's a bit of a failing, but
we'll come back to that. But then I'll throw it over to Cam.
Yeah.
What do you think of it?
So, Secret Agent is a movie I feel like it's the parts that make it enjoyable. As a whole, I just don't think it holds together at all. And so I would be sitting there and getting a little frustrated, and then you'd have like a shot, and we mentioned the train scene. We're packed on a train with all these German soldiers, which is a great setup. And then you have that shot out the window where you see the bodies hanging, like from a noose.
Yeah, great shot.
And I'm like, this is why this movie still has, sprinkles of magic throughout. It's because like Hitchcock can't really crank out just a serviceable suspense film. He has to like work in artistry that just manages to stand out. And so it's a movie that I'm frustrated with a lot of this movie, and we'll talk about it, in depth, but just things like the relationship, like the romance story to me is tough. The lead performance is tough, or we're going back and forth about the lead, but the character that drives the story, that performance is rough. So I sit there and get frustrated with the movie, but at the same time, Hitchcock will hit me with a moment, like an organ note just played for an extended period of time with a dead contact in a church.
My favorite scene of the film. My favorite scene.
It's brilliant. It's brilliant. And like, Scott, how many movies have we tackled from, the 1930s or 40s, which are just like, off the assembly mill? They have the recognizable parts, and they may even be more cohesive as a story than much of what's going on in Secret Agent.
Sure.
But there's not a single moment that feels truly inspired. And this movie has those moments. It's just that when it comes to the larger picture and I walk away from the movie, after you've turned it off, you go, okay, this is the follow-up to the 39 Steps, which is so tight, so well plotted, has a surprise turn with the villain that still holds up, and a really charismatic leading man, and Madeleine Carroll as well with him, who's fantastic, really leading the way. And it's like, it's a tough follow-up act that Secret Agent had to deliver, and it just doesn't.
Yeah, I think there's an attempt to be a bit different by taking you on a journey where the villain has supposedly been identified, and there's a fairly lengthy sequence running up to the killing of this person because the bad guys assume that he's the villain, and that goes all the way almost halfway to the halfway point of the movie, and then it transpires that guy was not the villain at all. And so you kind of think, well, what have I been watching for the last kind of 45 minutes? I've been cheated. It's the kind of thing that Hitchcock would have thought, oh, this is such a great jape, I'm going to cheat the audience. And he did that a lot, and sometimes it worked, but sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah, and I just wonder too, like, if there was lessons learned going from Robert Donat in the 39 Steps to John Gielgud in this film. Because you look at the leading men in Hitchcock films going forward, and it's a pretty great bunch. And I was looking at the Truffaut Hitchcock book, and Hitchcock has issues with Secret Agent and says one of the biggest lessons he learned was that the lead character needs to have a very well-defined purpose and like a goal that they're trying to achieve that he felt was not going on with the screenplay of this movie.
Well, the initial time you meet the protagonist, he is, told his actual identity has been killed, and he is now a secret agent. He never wanted to be a secret agent. He's just had it thrust upon him, which is a sort of the Hitchcock wrong man thing, which I do, wrong man, wrong place sort of thing. Right man, wrong place, whatever you want to say. But he has never wanted to be a spy, and he seems completely uninterested with being a spy.
Yeah.
He's just,
why choose him?
Yeah, he's just like on a little jaunt around Europe. I just find that an odd choice, and I think it's a good lesson that Hitchcock's learned and moved on with it. And I'll spin that into my thoughts. And we've spoken about it, but I think the ultimate albatross around the neck of this film is Gielgud. I mean, you've got a guy with the charisma of a chartered accountant, I'm sorry for chartered accountant listeners.
How many have you met, Scott? Come
I've
on.
met a couple, and
Okay,
I
fine.
mostly it's the Lion Tamer sketch from Monty Python in my head that sticks with me. That's really where my head goes to with chartered accountants.
Okay.
My father was an accountant.
Your father is a lovely man.
How
We
dare
had
you,
lunch
Scott?
together. It was a great time. Um, and so yeah, I'm probably going to get some hate mail for that, but as a joke, it works. And you know, it's funny because he's completely outshined by almost everyone in the film. I think the dog has more range.
The dog's great.
Yeah.
What a performance.
Like I
Yeah.
felt emotion when he was clawing at the door. I don't think Gielgud made me feel anything.
And the howl when his master died.
Yeah, like I'm a dog guy. I have a dog, and like I mean, my dog did look up when that scene played. So even my dog was affected by that dog's performance.
Yeah.
I think there's maybe something to be said for the fact that spies probably should be quite boring, insignificant characters who can move through a room without being noticed,
Mhm.
but not in a movie. Come on.
Yeah. And you could just tell that John Gielgud is not really that engaged with the material. One thing that shocked me though, how old do you think John Gielgud was in this movie?
Oh, that's a good
I've
question.
had this before. Like I've been tricked with these World War II, World War One films where like I think they're in their 50s and they're like 27.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So what's your guess?
You want me to actually guess?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna guess 38.
Okay.
I'm going to say that he looks, I don't know the answer, I'm going to say that he looks about 35, but he's probably like 26 or 27.
He was 32
Okay.
when he shot
Okay.
this movie.
We're not far off. But and sort of to Neil's point a little bit there, you know, spies work best a lot of the time when they're like a cipher and you can kind of imprint yourself on this escapism and that sort of thing.
Mhm.
I mean, they've nailed the cipher. This guy has nothing.
Yeah.
You can turn him into whatever you'd like. But it is that sort of like he doesn't have any level. He's just constantly horizontal in terms of like any energy to him. And I just find that as a film to base, you know, as a person to base your film around, I think it was just poor casting. And to my final point, and we'll move on to likes in a second. One film this reminded me of is another Hitchcock film, which is Torn Curtain.
Mm.
Well, I'm not to say that Paul Newman is anywhere near Gielgud in terms of level of performance, but miscast, I would say,
Mhm.
with Torn Curtain. And one thing I think Hitchcock did in Torn Curtain, which sticks with me, is like he fills it full of colorful characters to make up for that shortfalling. Like I'll always remember the Countess.
Yeah.
She'll never leave my brain.
She drives me around the bend.
But I love that.
Oh.
Like she drives around the bend, like in a bad way.
She doesn't do anything in that film except be annoying. She just turns up, is annoying,
Oh, sure.
and just delays the end of the film by about 10 minutes.
Sure. You could
remove her entirely, and it would make absolutely no difference.
You could, but I feel like it gives the film a bit of color that it didn't necessarily have.
Sure.
And so like you've got like Peter Lorre's outrageous performance in this film, but I think if this was a color film, would have us asking some questions.
God, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was a little unclear on what's going on with that character.
Well, he's more tan than he usually is.
Yes.
Well, he's known as the hairless Mexican, and for some reason there's a joke, which is that he is neither hairless nor Mexican.
So is he putting that on?
I don't know.
Yeah. It's best not to dig into it too much, I think.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Uh,
But I think the thing that strikes me about Brody, Gielgud's character, stroke Ashenden, is that he's been pulled out of France in the First World War, where presumably he's been doing quite a lot of killing,
Mhm.
and is then sent to kill one person, and he really turns his nose up at it. And he's like, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to kill someone for my country. That's revolting. And like, you think, well, what have you been doing? Have you been on a wine tasting of the Dordogne? No, you've been murdering Germans. Come on.
it's just one more. Get to it.
Yeah, like there's something interesting there about it. Someone who's maybe traumatized by the war and is pressed into intelligence work and can't do it. Like I think you could make that character dramatically interesting, but it's a different time period. They weren't going to go that angle.
Yeah.
Well, it's the thing that Hitchcock learned to do 10 years later with Notorious, was to put people in a similar situation whereby they're spies and they're involved in unpleasant deeds, and by the time Notorious comes around, he is genuinely invested in the psychological impact of that, and it is very briefly touched upon in Secret Agent, but not really explored. And as you say, it probably just wasn't the time. Audiences probably didn't want that kind of thing at that point. But it's like the spy movies that Hitchcock made, all they're not about spies. So they're about spying and they're about spy organizations, but by and large, the protagonist is an ordinary man or woman, or as ordinary as you can be when you look like Cary Grant or Ingrid Bergman. But they're just kind of people who get caught up in a spy plot. And I think the thing with Secret Agent is that he is not quite an everyman. He's already a soldier, so he's just being diverted somewhat from his normal routine, and so it's tough to identify with him, especially now when most of us watching this film are not soldiers. Maybe at the time when that film came out, people around would have had experience of the First World War, and we're probably gearing up for the next one. So I don't know. It's there are a lot of factors that make it tough to kind of get a grip on his character.
Well, it's also kind of interesting in the sense of that whole switch up, as you mentioned, about like he's out in France doing his job as a soldier, and then the next week he doesn't want to be a spy. He's like already a veteran and like an old. He can't do it anymore. It's too hard for him. It's like going from Quantum of Solace to Skyfall, which is I think takes place over like a space of a couple of months, and 007 goes from I'm a fresh faced 00 into like I'm sick of this job.
My knee hurts.
So it is a weird switch up, but let's celebrate. Let's talk about some good stuff, because there is good stuff here to talk about.
Yeah.
Neil, you're up first. What's something you really want to drill down to that you loved about the film?
Oh, there was quite a lot. I mean, there are some really nice, like I think the mood of a kind of mysterious black comedy is set up really nicely in the opening, with everybody somberly kind of circling this coffin, which then turns out to be empty, and the one-armed servant attempts to pick it up and drops it, and you're not quite sure whether to laugh at that or not, but I think it's that kind of sets the mood quite well. There are some wonderful little Hitchcockian sequences in there, like transitions. There's one where I think it's a boat leaves the frame and leaves like a big smoky cloud behind it, which dissolves into a cloud of smoke or something. I should have probably thought this through more carefully before. I just remember I just remember the smoke. I can't remember what happened to either side of it, but it's two separate things. Maybe that's not one of the best ones to fixate on. I suppose the thing for me, like I've probably mentioned too many times already, is the sound design. So there's a really interesting motif in this film, which is like a long sustained dissonant or discordant sound, which is different each time, which kind of signifies danger or a threat or something uneasy or underhanded going on. And Cam, you already mentioned the chord. So the two protagonists, Brody and the general, they go into a church to meet a contact, and throughout this entire scene, all you can hear on the soundtrack is this chord coming from the organ, and it's actually not a chord. I was reading about this. There's an excellent book by a lady called Elizabeth Weiss. I think it's called The Silent Scream. I should probably check that. But she does a whole chapter on Secret Agent, and she says that this chord is actually not a chord. It's a discord or a non-chord or something like that. So the individual notes that make it up. And so it's deliberately been chosen to be an uneasy sound.
Yeah, it's a discordant note. It's not harmonically pleasing to the ear. It's
Exactly.
two different notes that aren't in the same key played together, if my ear was correct with that. I couldn't tell you exactly what the pitch
There
was.
you go.
I'm just trying to find the book for you, sorry.
Yeah. And so this goes on for ages, and when they finally approach the organist, they realize that he's dead. And the reason, I mean, it's unlikely that he would sit there with his hands on these notes for this whole time, because all they have to do is kind of brush up against him and he falls over. But that's wonderful. And then that kind of gets repeated later on with we were talking about the scene where the wrong man gets bumped off. And Hitchcock keeps cutting back to his wife and dog, and there are there's a lot of cross-cutting from one scene to the other, and it just keeps swapping backwards and forwards, and each time the dog is kind of getting more and more distressed, even though he's miles away and can't see what's going on. He knows that something's going on, so his kind of whining and howling is another example of that. And actually, when the guy gets pushed off the cliff, you don't see that, and there's no sound effect of that scene, but you get the sound effect of the dog whine, which is like a high pitch to a low pitch, the exact kind of sound effect that you would expect when kind of Wile E. Coyote gets pushed off a cliff or something.
I didn't pick up on that. That's a great spot. Like the
Yeah,
actual
there's a
use
lot
of
of that.
the high pitched tone of a whine to the low as they settle off in their sort of whine. That's
Yeah,
great.
yeah. Watch it back. He kind of goes,
It's like a slide
oh.
whistle.
Yes,
Yeah.
like the man with the golden gun.
And just to jump in to give you the reference for the book, the full title is The Silent Scream: Alfred Hitchcock's Soundtrack by Elizabeth Weiss.
Yeah, recommended. Really good. There's also a scene which appears to be set at a wedding or some kind of celebration in Europe somewhere, where everybody is swirling coins around in a bowl, and that is a really kind of unpleasant noise, and that goes on for ages, and that's where they discover that they have killed the wrong person. And then later on, there's this great big scene in a big set piece in a chocolate factory, and there's this kind of hammering machinery going on in the background, and it's very deliberately there to muffle the sound of what people are saying, because what Hitchcock does in this scene is go back to his silent roots and tells a story almost entirely visually. There are little snippets of dialogue, but basically you get what's going on from what you're seeing. The sound of the machinery is there to disguise the fact that people are saying things. You don't need to know what they're saying because it's obvious, but also it kind of raises up this tension. But again, it's quite difficult to listen to. And in the same sequence, there's a fire alarm that goes off, which is just more kind of punishment for the ears. But that's a very deliberate thing that is threaded throughout the film. It's not there by accident. It doesn't just happen once, and it doesn't really happen in. I mean, there are probably other films where that kind of thing happens, but not all the way through like that. And I find that I didn't really notice that until I came to watch it for the book with a slightly keener kind of eye and ear, and I was like, oh, okay, this is going on. That's fascinating.
There's also like the church bell sequence as well when they're
Oh yeah,
hiding and the bells, and they're playing with the soundtrack of like the whispering to the point where you can hear it, and they finally get to a point where you can hear what they're saying.
yeah, and it's when he zooms in, so he uses camera and sound at the same time so in the wider shot you can't hear what they're saying. The camera zooms into the ear, and at that point you can hear. That's kind of classic Hitchcock fun.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like these sound sequences, which are really effective, and that's kind of what I was talking about when saying like the parts that jump out are really great. And the one that really jumped out to me, you highlighted the sound, but the visuals of pushing Kapor off the cliff, where you have like the whole build up, the binocular shot or the telescope shot. It's really beautiful visually, but it's just complemented by obviously a very strong use of sound as well. And it's like those moments. Hitchcock can't just deliver something that's pat. It has to be kind of special when it matters.
Yeah, exactly that.
I was just sort of reminded of the Eiger sanction during that, but like the spyglass looking at the thing going on the mountain. That's a 1970s Clint Eastwood throwback for you there. But Cam, what's your like?
Peter Lorre. Peter Lorre was going through a lot of drug issues at the time of shooting this movie, and maybe they're apparent, maybe they're not. I'll leave that for the viewer to decide when they watch the movie.
They're trying to cut around him a couple of times, it felt like. There's a scene where like they're doing some shots where Peter's there, and then they'll like kind of cut the scene away from him, even though he should still be in the frame.
Yeah, and maybe it's influencing the performance a little bit. Not sure, but it is the kind of performance that's invaluable. And John Gielgud does not benefit from having Peter Lorre next to him because he's just completely blown off screen. But we have talked about Peter Lorre many times, Scott. We named him our MVP of the year a couple of years ago, I think.
2022, maybe, or 2023, one of the two. Yeah,
I think so, because we just randomly ended up watching 4 of his movies that year.
like 6, I think, actually. It was a lot.
Yeah, it was a lot. Yeah. And he is invaluable to this movie. Like, what an odd character creation. The flamboyance of that character. The scene where he destroys like a bathroom because he wasn't assigned a wife. He's like ripping up toilet paper, like smashing the shelves.
He just has a massive fight with toilet roll.
Yeah, I'm like watching it. I'm like, this is absolutely nuts. And like John Gielgud gives the most like kind of response. He does not seem unsettled by this man at all. But like he's a character that whether he's like chasing maids down the hallway or flirting with that woman at like the celebration or just like going nuts, he's someone who always just jolts the movie to life. And I wanted to see more of his character. I wanted to learn more, but I also like that they kept so much of it obscured and very vague.
Yeah, if there ever there was a character who needed like a whole series of films, including an origin story, he's the one. I would love to have seen him pop up in more things. Um, but it's interesting that he is kind of assigned the role of the killer.
Hmm.
So Gielgud is like sent out to kind of identify the bad guy, and he has to take the general along because the general has absolutely no compunction about killing. And I guess that's where some of the tension between the characters and Gielgud's assignment and his true feelings come from. It's not entirely successfully done, but yeah, he's a he's a wild card.
And he would have had a reputation with audiences because The Man Who Knew Too Much had come out, where he's not the nicest of guys. And Fritz
Yeah.
Lang's M was out, where he's like a child killer. So like people would not necessarily look at Peter Lorre as a dashing hero. And so as you said, have that tension of putting him next to this kind of very rigid leading man type. And there's always something untrustworthy about them. And so even though a lot of the plot doesn't generate the tension you'd hope, the character does.
There's a line that I wrote down. I don't often write down quotes in the films about Peter Lorre's character, and it's someone else talking about him and goes, "Lady killer, eh? Not only ladies."
Mm-hmm.
And like a part of that obviously is more like the face value of he kills men too, but I feel like there's some subtext in that.
There is some ambiguity.
Yeah, and I just love that little nugget because it gives you a lot more about the Peter Lorre character in this film.
Mm-hmm. That's why his death is such a bummer.
Yeah.
Because, like, the character in this type of era is going to die at the end because his morality is very questionable. But you want a more fitting end than what he gets.
Do you think that he sleeps with the girlfriend of the guy from the chocolate factory? Let's call him Willy Wonka.
Yeah,
Let's from now on.
that is his name.
So Willy Wonka's fiance is met by Peter Lorre's character in this celebration,
Yeah.
and then later on you just see them in a hotel room together, and it's the morning, and she's in bed, and he's got some information out of her, and I think it's kind of obvious what's happened there, in the same way that
Yeah.
it's very obvious what John Gielgud and Madeleine Carroll have been up to in the course of one slow dissolve.
Yeah. I would say that one was pretty much confirmed in my mind.
Yeah, I won't argue against that. Although I have to imagine his character's bedroom antics must be somewhat memorable.
Creative, for sure. Like, there's a lot of ripped up toilet paper involved.
Yeah, like, he uses them as streamers and just like dances around as he performs. It's a whole show with Peter Lorre. For my I feel like kind of covering some of the territory we've already done. I mean, I was going to point out, I just love some of those great moments where Hitchcock ratchets up the tension. We mentioned the dog, that church with the sustain dissonant chord, the train. There is bits of the train that work for me. I think it is too short, and I think a different film could have done that better. And I think probably does actually in some other films. You think of like the bus sequence in Torn Curtain. Like that's a really protracted sequence, but like there is a real ratcheting up that tension as they're slowly being chased. They stop and pass and all that sort of stuff.
Hitchcock was doing a lot of smashing up of trains at this time in Number 17 and The Lady Vanishes and this. It's like he had a real problem with trains.
I love all the model railway stuff as well. As a
Yeah.
railway enthusiast, it was great to see.
Yeah, the derailing was actually pretty well done too.
Yeah, for miniatures that are only like a few inches, like it looks pretty real.
Yeah.
And I think that when you saw this in cinemas, I think some of the frames within that crash scene were tinted red. So you would have got some color in there. You would have seen some flashes of color, which would have spiced it up a bit. But they, as far as I'm aware, none of that has made it through to any of the transfers that we have today.
Okay.
The only other thing I wanted to shout out that no one's really spoken too much about, apart from the length of Marvin's pipe, you're welcome, is I think Madeleine Carroll is great.
Yeah.
I think it's not 39 Steps.
No.
No.
But Or I Was the Spy, which I think is a really lesser known Madeleine Carroll film people should check out, that we've done an episode on in the past. Go check that out in our back catalogue. But I think she does a lot with this, especially in the first half of the film before she becomes sort of a bit more doting towards the end, which is something you get with so many of these older spy films where the female character just like loses all agency because they're in love.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like even like one of my favorite spy film, Notorious, like has moments of that, and it really gets me sometimes. That like, Ingrid, come on, show some metal, and but yeah, like I just think like she does a lot with what she's given, and I think the star power is there from the second she's on screen running around in that towel. You're like, yeah, Madeleine Carroll is in the room, and again, it's I actually feel worse for Gielgud because against Madeleine Carroll, again, like people are like, oh, he's no Robert Donat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and like her character, I like that she's someone who's there for the excitement and the adventure. What drove me nuts was, we'll get to the love story in a few moments, I think, but you have the reveal of the villain, and they're like, you cut to the Ara character, and they're like, okay, clearly Elsa's in on this and understands who's behind it, and she's like, no, I don't know anything, like was completely clueless. I'm like, one little twist there would have given her a little bit more agency.
Yeah, and if you kind of dig back into what must have the events that before what we see in the film, he has obviously met her at some point. The villain has met Elsa, and they've just started kind of hanging out together. And she is in absolutely no way suspicious of him whatsoever. He's just a guy who's kind of hanging around. And it seems like, he's the only one in the film who has no backstory. And the audience is just probably, I mean, modern audiences certainly, I don't know what it was like back in the day, but it just feels fairly obvious that he's a wrong 'un from the word go.
Yeah.
I would say the mark against the Elsa character is she's very much the Inspector Clouseau of this film. She just falls into that, like just stumbles into the end of the film.
Doesn't go to as many nudist colonies though.
No, but that was the style at the time, I guess.
We interrupt this program to bring you a special report.
Red alert, spy hards! We are shaking things up over on the Patreon page.
That's right, we are launching an exclusive new show where we tackle the exploits of the small screen's greatest secret agents, like Jack Bauer, George Smiley, and beyond.
And don't forget, every month you also get 2 Agents in the Field episodes where we decode the adventures of your favorite spy actors in their biggest non-spy movies. But Cam, tell the people what we have coming up next.
Scott, this month we are paying tribute to recently deceased director David Lynch over on the Patreon. First up, we're going to look at 1980's Elephant Man and determine how this Oscar-nominated biopic stacks up against the surreal works to come. Is it a classic? We'll investigate.
So don't get left out in the cold. Help support your favorite spy movie podcast and join the circus at patreon.com/spyhards. But before this message self-destructs, let's get back to the spy jinx. Well, that wraps us up for likes, dislikes. Things that got under our skin. We've spoken about Gielgud, so I think I'm going to take him off the table because I think we've done that one to death. But Neil, I'm going to go to you first. Something else you want to sort of mention about the film?
I don't know. It feels a bit mean. I mean, I've kind of dissed the ending already. That's probably my biggest problem with this whole film. Honestly, I don't think that I have a huge problem with much more of it. There are little things like we are expected to believe that the existence of a jacket button clearly identifies that this one man is the bad guy. Now, yes, he has the same buttons on his jacket, or similar buttons at least, but none of them are missing. And that is enough evidence for them to go and kill this guy. And at no point do we see that the actual villain has got any missing buttons. The whole missing button is literally a thread left dangling.
Boom.
And that is kind of un-Hitchcockian and un-Bennettian. I would have expected that to have been, tied up. So sorry, at some point. But no, I mean, apart from that, really, I don't think there's a great deal that I dislike about it.
It makes you very thankful for modern day forensics.
Sure.
Because we're not doing that to people now. Oh, there's a button there. Oh, he's getting pushed off a cliff.
There was a lot of coincidence going on with we have a button, we accidentally dropped it on the gambling table, and the guy who is apparently maybe missing a button or something is right there.
There's a whole other like slapstick scene where the guy running the table just pulls that into the slot with the rest of the coins, and then they spend 20 minutes chasing around the banker in the room trying to get the coin out of the slot. Obviously, that would be a comedy, but that could have been fun.
Scott, you and I are Vegas regulars.
Yeah.
Can you imagine if we tried to stage this comedy act on a Vegas table?
Oi, your button! You must be a murderer. Yeah, I could see how that would go.
We would be escorted out immediately.
Yeah, we'd get banned for life from Circus most likely because we're that sort of style of people.
Right.
What about you, Cam? Something else for dislikes?
I think the love story for
Yeah.
me just doesn't work. And I mean, it's obviously Gielgud's a big part of it because you want to have chemistry, but you just don't have, like, I don't understand even these characters as a pair. They don't even really make sense. I think Robert Young's character of Marvin makes almost more sense for Elsa because they're kind of on the same page.
There's more chemistry for sure.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Like Robert Young is, as a villain, not necessarily the greatest, but he is like movie star wattage in this film. And so he has a chemistry that comes through. And the Madeleine Carroll character is like a lot of fun. She wants excitement and winds up with John Gielgud. Like, that seems counterintuitive to what she actually wants. And the fact that it completely just torpedoes her character. Whereas you look at something like the 39 Steps, she shows up like partway through that film, is handcuffed to Robert Donat, and the bubbling chemistry between the two of them, the fun back and forth, you understand that romantic spark and why that is going to carry into the end. And yes, female characters in these types of movies in this time period, when they fall in love, doesn't necessarily do a lot for their agency, as Scott said. But nonetheless, when you get to the end of the 39 Steps, you buy them as a pair that are working together and enjoying kind of the adventure together. Whereas here, it feels like her character just gets torpedoed because we need to give John Gielgud a reason to do something.
Yeah, it is something we've stumbled into a bunch of times in these older spy films, and unfortunately some newer ones too, where they just don't know how to write love stories or convincing ones at that. Like, I don't know why they put these two together apart from the fact that they have to be because the plot says so.
Yeah. I Was a Spy had a bit of a clunky love story as well.
Yes.
That one was more just because it was so brief. Like, it was introduced very abruptly. This one, it's going to happen, but there's never a point where you start to think this is a good idea that this is going to happen.
I mean, she takes about 2/3 through the film, she declares her love for Gielgud's character and like that. Forget my job. I'm in love with you, and that's what it is. And there's almost no seeds to get to that point. There's not even like moments where like in mission times they like look at each other or like this something there. There is just zero chemistry, which I don't know if that's just bad writing in that sense. Maybe they didn't write the right scenes for them, or it is sort of the lack of chemistry with Gielgud and Carroll. It's hard to tell.
I feel like Gielgud had better chemistry on the phone with Robert Young.
Oh, there was like a spark there, wasn't there? Like he had a little twinkle
There
in his
was.
eye.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That was quite sexy.
Yeah, they were both enjoying that experience.
Lady killer, eh? Not only the ladies.
It's a shame also that she kind of walks out on him and leaves a note. And she's obviously very pissed off and angry. And then the next time they meet, she has forgotten all of that. She just literally runs into his arms and is like,
She's
"Oh,
like, you.
yes."
The only thing I've got left to add in the dislike section is I'm surprised of how small this feels compared to maybe 39 Steps might be a bad one to compare it to, but the man who knew too much, even that feels like, I mean, there's a more like location shooting. There's a little bit done in London with that one, if I remember correctly. This film feels very staged. It's on a studio the entire time, from what I can tell. There's like a lot of backdrops used and stuff, but yeah, it never really feels like it has any scale to it. Whereas like 39 Steps, they're running around the moors of Scotland and stuff. There's a tangible feel to it, and they're using like miniature trains and stuff. It's saving money here. I imagine it's a budgetary thing as well, but it does feel like a smaller film. I know it's referred to as a lesser Hitchcock film, but it also just feels like a smaller film.
I mean, I like the mountain climbing sequence. Like, that added a bit of
Sure.
something. But yeah, it didn't feel like I don't know. It felt like he was going for like kind of the Swiss ambiance or an imagined Swiss ambiance.
Sure.
That was enough for me, but you are right. Like, you didn't get that sense of like 39 Steps. You feel like someone who's like on a journey and you're seeing the locations as you go. Whereas here it felt a little more tied to just a couple locations.
Yeah, it doesn't. Those bits, those sequences don't quite connect as well, do they? And as you say, the scenes shot through the telescope are very obvious, just stick figures standing on some cotton wool, um, which is disappointing.
Well, let's go to any final notes before we hit the knock list on our way out. I've only got one, I think, maybe a secondary if we get there, but I didn't spot the Hitchcock cameo in this film. Can you tell me where it was, and for the listeners who maybe didn't spot it as well?
I don't think there is one.
I didn't see any Hitchcock cameo in this one. And there's some early movies.
Oh, I thought it was in every film. I thought it was just a thing.
Yeah, no, there's not one in every film.
They're spotty, especially in the early films.
I'm just going to refer to this book that I found
Oh,
lying around.
let's,
It's called Hitchology.
Available in all
yeah.
good bookstores, I think.
Well, online mainly, but yes. Where are we? 117. I don't think. Oh, I've helpfully not actually done a list here. I've just built it all into the text. I can't see a secret agent in here. I don't think there is one. If there is, yeah. If there is, it's hidden.
Oh, it's not in the book. I've read the chapter, reread the chapter today. So yeah, it's not in the book. Okay. Well, then that's the first one I think I've seen without a cameo from him.
Yeah, there's a handful.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Just a note there, I guess. Cam, anything from you?
At one point, John Gielgud checks into the hotel, and the guy at the desk is like, "Your wife is waiting for you." And he's like, "Wife?" That reminded me of Live and Let Die.
That's really interesting. Like I wrote in a first draft of the chapter, I wrote an incredibly long synopsis of this film that, if you like, I can read. It's not that long. It's a paragraph. Would you like me to read it?
Yes.
It's basically, you'll see what I'm getting at as it goes on. So here is a synopsis of Alfred Hitchcock's Secret Agent. A spy is given a mission by a British intelligence official who's known only by a single initial. Assuming a false identity, the spy must travel to a picturesque country and stop, by assassination if necessary, an enemy agent furthering the cause of foreign powers. Along the way, he's accompanied by a beautiful woman with whom he'll inevitably make love, and a friendly male agent with whom he inevitably won't because he's fiercely heterosexual. Secret codes and signals are passed back and forth, double agents are murdered, and at one point our hero meets his apparent target in a casino. So you can see where we're going with this.
Sound familiar?
This is all very familiar territory to anyone who's ever watched a Bond film. And yes, the scene where he checks in and his wife's already arrived is classic Live and Let Die. And then the other very obvious Bond connection is probably You Only Live Twice, where the hero is effectively murdered at the beginning, but not really.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Yeah. And I did think like John Gielgud has a little bit of like kind of an Ian Fleming look.
Yeah.
I could see that.
Yeah.
Like he's not Sean Connery. That's for sure.
He definitely isn't.
No. He wishes he were.
Yeah. The only other note I had was, and we haven't mentioned this character, that Florence Kahn as Mrs. Kapor is amazing. Like this character, like what is her world? Everything about her kind of made me laugh because you have the scene of her like doing German lessons with Madeleine Carroll, but there's an intensity. Like, what is this woman's story?
I don't know necessarily what, like, I mean, she's obviously got like a quite a fun life she seems to live. She seems to really enjoy her knitting, and quizzing people on their German. And if you can't get your kicks that way, then how are you going to do it?
She's probably a rare example of a German character in a film about war between Germany and everywhere else, where that character is sympathetic. And there was a little bit of this in Hitchcock about not all Germans are Nazis, they're not all bad. She's a fun little character. She's the kind of person that I think Bennett would have thrown in to lighten the mood a bit.
I will cap off the notes section with something I noticed on IMDb that might be my favorite bit of IMDb deep diving I've ever done in my life.
Okay.
And I hope this comes from the official cast list somewhere. And I haven't gone through the credits to double check it, but I genuinely hope it's in there too. And I think Neil would be able to jump in and help me out. The 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10th billed person on IMDb is Sebastian Cabot as Bit Part.
Yep, that's the character's name.
That is truly fantastic. It's like capital B, Bit, capital P,
Yeah.
Art. So his name is Mr.
The name's
Part.
Part.
You
Bit
know.
Part.
Yeah, exactly. If that is not the best bit of film trivia you've ever heard in your life, I don't know what is. That's got to come up on like a Hitchcock pub quiz at some point. Like who played Bit Part? Everyone's like,
I have
oh,
no idea which character that is.
That's incredible. That feels like a precursor to the Sam Raimi fake Shemp credit that he uses. Fake Shemp in the old Three Stooges cartoons, there was a character named Shemp, and at a certain point, the actor who played Shemp or was Shemp was not doing well, and so they would put in other people as stand-ins. And so whenever Sam Raimi has like bit parts, he'll put fake Shemp.
Okay.
right, okay. I was blown away when I read this earlier, and I wrote it down and circled it in my notes. But Bit Part has to be my favorite character name of all time. Really, that's a real like Bond level. Like it's like Odd Job villain. Like Bit. Well, actually, it feels like an Austin Powers gag. You know, like random task. Oh, Bit Part, go and take him out.
Or Bad Guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Or Mr. Kill.
Look it up, folks. We're not making this up. We're not making this up. Yeah, a name to die for, right?
Good eye though, Scott, for checking that one out.
Thank you. I had my Weetabix today. Well, the last question we have.
Hold on though. Hold on now.
Wait.
Because like bit part. Why did you immediately hone in on Sebastian Cabot and not Dennis Blakelock as minor role?
Oh my God! I didn't even spot that. He hasn't got a picture on his IMDb. Yeah, minor role. Are these in the credits, Neil?
I very much doubt it.
Oh, I hope they are. I'm gonna go back and check this out. This is my favorite bit of IMDb in a long time. Minor role and Bit Part are my favorite double act. Never mind Winton Kid. It's minor role and Bit Part.
Yeah, or Bambi and Thumper.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Okay, well, the final question we need to answer. The reason we're here every week talking about different spy movies is to find the best spy movies of all time and create a list for you all at home to share with your loved ones and maybe some people you hate too, with the best spy movies of all time. And we need to ask, is Secret Agent making this list? Now, we've had some Hitchcocks on there before. Cam, can you remind us which ones have made the list?
North by Northwest, Notorious, and the 1950s Man Who Knew Too Much.
Okay, so the 30s version and Torn Curtain didn't make it.
Yes, that's right, yeah.
That's a shame. I would have plumped for the 30s version over the 50s version.
I did too.
Good.
Our guest and Cam outvoted me on that one.
Yeah. I feel like that was one of the more controversial decisions.
We've had some blowback on that one for sure. I find
Yeah.
the 30s one just a bit more. It's just a bit more character in it, like the mum character and stuff with the sniper rifle. It's just great.
Sniper rifle.
There's a chair fight in a church. Who more could you want?
Yeah.
And Peter Lorre.
Yeah, exactly. Being Peter Lorre. No mustache though.
No.
So
sadly.
there is that. No. Shame.
No.
But we get 3 votes as we have a guest, and we have a Hitchcock expert to help us guide us through this journey here. Neil, you're up first. Yes or no, would you put Secret Agent on the list of the greatest spy movies of all time?
I'm going to say probably not. I'm very sorry, Secret Agent. We've just talked about you for an hour and a half. But no, it's not. Like I said, it's not an essential Hitchcock. It's not an essential spy movie. It's a really good one for completists, and there is stuff in there that is worth watching for casual viewers. But you are not going to put this up there in the pantheon.
Okay, that's 1 no. Cam, what have you got?
Yeah, it's a no for me as well. Secret Agent feels like one that if someone's like, I've watched Notorious, I've watched Foreign Correspondent, I've watched all these other classic Hitchcocks, you'd say, oh, you should check out Secret Agent if you haven't seen that one. It feels like a little more of an obscurity, and a movie that's an obscurity probably for a reason. It's just not on the same tier.
Sure. Okay.
Your vote is irrelevant. Sorry.
Yeah, I get it. I get this all the time. It's why I go last. I like to just have fun with it. Yeah, well, that as you pointed out, 2 no's. So my vote is completely irrelevant, as it usually is when we have a guest. But I will just say, any film that has characters by the name of minor role and bit part should be making the knock list. But alas, I don't think I can use my vote for comedy. No. I think there's a big failing in this film, and it is its lead, unfortunately. But we've been going for it for the last hour and a half. I won't go any further. It's a no from me. 3 no's, and as such, the film is not making the knock list. The dossier on the film is complete and filed as classified. And that's a wrap. We fell off a cliff. Ah!
The dog is very sad.
My dog is probably howling. Yeah, my dog is sad right now. He's not had attention for an hour and a half. Before we let you go, Neil, I have to ask you a follow-up question. This is not Secret Agent. This is a Hitchcock question.
Okay.
We mentioned some films that have made the knock list, but if you were going to list Alfred Hitchcock's 5 best spy movies, doesn't have to be in any order, what would you pick?
I would. Well, North by Northwest is one of the greatest films of all time. Ditto Notorious. So they're both in there. I mean, there aren't a ton. Like, does Rear Window count as a spy movie? It's basically about a man spying.
Not really.
It's like
Okay, fine.
surveillance,
Let's not
isn't
say
it,
that.
really?
Foreign Correspondent, I would put in there. The Lady Vanishes, and the aforementioned short film Bon Voyage. I think they're all top tier spy movies from Mr. Hitchcock.
Okay.
There's Jamaica Inn as well, which is kind of a spy. It's about a spy, although he's spectacularly incompetent.
It's true.
Yeah.
Sounds like a film for me.
Yeah, that would not make it. But yeah, I think that was 5, wasn't it?
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, I think that's a solid 5 too. Yeah.
I don't think Bon Voyage is on our list of films to tackle.
Well, it's a short one. You can watch it several times in a day and have fun with it.
We could still have an hour and a half discussion. We would just watch it 3 times to prepare.
Sure.
That's right. Yeah.
Neil, we've said all we can say on Secret Agent, on Hitchcock. I don't want to go any further because I want people to go pick up a copy of the book. It gets the Spy Hard seal of approval, which is worth absolutely nothing. But have it anyway.
Oh, no, it's not. It's very, very valuable. Thank you. That's very kind.
We kind of mentioned it before, but where can people find copies of the book? We'll have a link in the show notes below anyway for everyone, but where's the best place to pick it up?
Yeah, just go online and Google Hitchology and you will find it on all the usual retailers, large and small. It would be lovely if you could walk into a bookshop and if they don't have it, ask them for it. Bookshops need your help. So please do that if you can before anything else, but if you need it in a hurry, I understand why you might go elsewhere.
And aside from the book, we'll have links, as I mentioned, in the show notes below to grab a copy of Hitchology, a film-by-film guide to the style and themes of Alfred Hitchcock. But, Neil, where can people find you online?
I am on Blue Sky and Instagram. The handle is Mr. Neil Alcock. And I have a website, which is neilalcock.com, where you can see some of the writing that I've done over the years. And if you are a real glutton for punishment, you can go and look at The Incredible Suit, which is a silly blog that I wrote for about 10 or 12 years and have since abandoned to gather dust.
What could people expect on that forgotten site?
A lot of Bond love, a lot of Hitchcock love, some silliness. In the early days, it was just stupid. It was just making fun of posters, basically. That's all I did for about 4 years. And then people started actually inviting me to reviews, which was incredible, considering all I'd done is make fun of their posters. To invite me to review their films. So yeah, there's a bunch of reviews on there if you can be bothered to look for them. But
Okay. Yeah, we'll have links to those in the show notes for sure.
Okay. Great.
Well, it's been a pleasure. We finally made it happen, Neil. We're glad you could join us.
Yeah, it's been a long time coming, but thank you so much for inviting me. I've really enjoyed it.
We'll have to give you a non-Hitchcock film next time round.
Okay, sure.
Stretch the spy wings. We'll find another spy movie that you like and talk about it.
Okay.
Hitchcock influenced, perhaps.
Perhaps
Yeah.
so.
Have you done The Spy in Black?
Yes, we
Yes.
Right.
We
do
haven't done
that
the
then.
follow-up,
Yeah.
though.
Oh yeah. No, don't ask me about that one. It was boring.
Oh, okay. I haven't seen it yet. I had high hopes.
Oh, sorry.
Okay. Whoopsie.
Those are squashed.
Yeah, well, it's the end of a Spy Hards episode. It's a downer for everyone. We're all going home now. So,
Oh, there you go.
what a
So
note to
sad.
play us out on. Neil, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, guys.
There you go, folks. That was our chat about Secret Agent, another Hitchcock in the bag.
That's right. And it's fun to talk about these more minor Hitchcock films because when you do North by Northwest, people are like, we know what that episode is going to be. That's the greatest hits. And of course, from our point of view, those are the more challenging ones in some ways because everything has been said about North by Northwest. Versus something like Secret Agent, it's just like a lot more room to play with.
Exactly. And like, I don't want to go back to the heady days of early Spy Hards where we were tackling North by Northwest, running into it like a kid in a candy store. I dare not go back to those reviews because I don't know what we were adding to the discussion necessarily, but we had a good time with them.
We had a great time. Great time.
I think we had like a little skit about Cary Grant playing D&D with his mum.
What? Oh, it's all gone. It's all gone.
Yeah. Only because that bit left an impression in my mind, like it just how much of a strange bloke Cary Grant's character seemed like in North by Northwest. But anyway, I won't tease anymore because you guys haven't listened to it. Go and listen to the episode; it's like right at the start. But speaking of other episodes, our mission continues. Cam, what are we talking about next week?
Scott, Secret Agent is a movie that takes place just at the precipice of World War II. Well, next week, we're going to tackle an adventure set during World War II. We are going to look at the 2011 Marvel film, Captain America First Avenger, starring Chris Evans. And yes, it does have spy connections, people.
Yes, believe us. Believe in Steve Rogers and believe in truth, justice, and the American way as we take patriotism overseas with Captain America, the First Avenger. And you may note, of course, the new Captain America film, Brave New World, is also releasing next week. We thought we'd try and tie it in, a little bit of synergy for you there. It's almost as if we planned this stuff.
Planning? What's that?
I don't know. But your mission, folks, should you choose to accept it, is to join us next week as we take a look at Captain America, the First Avenger. And if you don't already, make sure to follow us on social media at SpyHards, SPYHARDS, Facebook, Instagram, X, Blue Sky, Threads, TikTok, basically anywhere I can get a hold of the at SpyHards handle. And if I haven't got there yet, and you've managed to snag it before I have, I'm coming for you. But until next week, folks, this floor makes my beautiful legs very angry.